Okay, segment 4. So segment 4 talked about the vestibulospinal responses, and without these vestibulospinal responses, our balance would be severely degraded, because when we stand, humans are inherently unstable, and it is our vestibular system and its responses with our spinal cord that keep us upright. So it talks about spatial disorientation, which is basically any impairment of spatial orientation. And spatial orientation is our sense of linear motion, angular motion, or tilt. So next it talks about spatial orientation cortex. Humans have visual and auditory cortexes, but not necessarily a vestibular cortex. So the perception of body motion and tilt results from multi-sensory convergence, except for one specific cortex. So the vestibular thalamocortical pathways is where vestibular information reaches the cortex via what are called the thalamocortical pathways, and vestibular information reaches this cortex via the thalamus. Neurons from the vestibular nuclei carry vestibular information to the thalamus, where it's processed and relayed to the cortex. So the temporo-parieto-insular cortex is involved in spatial orientation perception, and it receives input from both the semicircular canals and ophiolith organs. And there is a vestibular pathway that leads to the hippocampus through the cortex, and neurons in the hippocampal formation respond to vestibular stimuli. These neurons are called head direction cells, and they spike vigorously when an animal's head is pointed towards a specific direction. So cortical influences are the areas of the cortex that receive projections from the vestibular system and that also project back to the vestibular nuclei. So it also talks about when the vestibular system goes bad, and this is quite common as you age, and it talks about two types of conditions that you can have when your vestibular system goes bad. So the first one is Mal-de-Barracement syndrome, and it translates literally to disembarking sickness, and it's called this because it's the prolonged feeling that you have after you disembark from like a ship. So the symptoms are spatial disorientation, imbalance, rocking, and it can last for a month to years, and the cause is unknown. The next one is Meniere's syndrome, and the symptoms are dizziness, imbalance, spatial disorientation, it is severe, and it can occur randomly at any time without notice. And the treatment is lowering pressure in the inner ear, implanted devices that provide transtympanic micropressure pulses, or procedures, or in severe cases, it's procedures that completely destroy the vestibular apparatus.